So thank you for taking the time out at the end of your day or potentially in the mid-afternoon of your day. Thanks for giving us some of your time to talk to Chris from Wealthsimple. Chris, welcome.
Thank you. Super excited to be here.
Perfect. We're excited to do this. So what we're going to do today, guys, is, quick agenda is we're going to get a chance. Everybody here on the call should have some beers at their home, correct? Can I get someone to yell yes, they have their beers in front of them?
Yep.
Beautiful. Thank you, Myron. Thank you for jumping in. We want to keep this team and everybody as interactive as possible. We're going to do a quick set of introductions, and then we're going to go into, instead of the questions right away, we're all here for the free beer. I get it. I only put my hand up to do this because I was like, what? I get free beer? I'm in. So with that, I will introduce myself. My name is Steve Gindi. I have been with Okta for a little bit over a year. I am an account manager here at Okta, working with some of our strategic customers, Wealthsimple being one of them. I've spent over 20 years in traditional cybersecurity. I'd like to say I was a nerd at heart, and for a big part of my career, I was a systems engineer, so the technology gets me excited, which was one of the reasons why I joined Okta a little over a year ago. We're going to jump over to Ahmed, and we're going to say Christopher at the end.
Thank you, Steve. My name is Ahmed. I've been also at Okta for about a year and a half now. About 8 years in cybersecurity, and thought Okta would be a great place to land. So I'm Wealthsimple Senior Customer Success Manager, and they're one of my good accounts, and we're happy to have Chris here today.
Awesome. And with that, Chris, I'd like you to take a moment and introduce everybody, what you do at Wealthsimple. Give us a little bit about yourself, and we'll go from there.
Thanks. It's awesome to be here today. My name is Chris Ejbich. I've been IT manager at Wealthsimple for just over 5 years now. So a huge amount of time in terms of the company. I joined them when they were a lot smaller. Grown more than 10x since I joined them, which is an exciting thing to think about.
Yeah.
I've been in the field of tech for just over 10 years. I worked for Apple a little bit before I worked with Wealthsimple, and focused a little bit on retail initially, and then transferred over to the business side of things, and I've been loving it ever since.
Awesome. And thank you, one, for being one of our customers. Two, thank you for taking the time out of your day to join us here on this panel. I think we're going to have an exciting time. So before we kick it off with questions, what I'm hoping is everybody has their taste package that has been sent to your house. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be taking a look and taking a sip of Quail's Brewery. Quail's Brewery is nestled right here in the hills of Oromadante, Ontario. It sits between Lower Georgian Bay and Lake Simcoe. It's just a quick short drive from the region of Toronto. It has a beautiful, peaceful surrounding, beautiful fresh air, and a rich history. It is a perfect setting to brew the crafted beer that is being sponsored today with their Beers for Peers. At Quail's, they use their own spring water. They farm fresh hops. That way they can create to you, the end user, a lasting farm-to-glass experience is how they like to describe it. So with that, the first one that I think we're going to take a try is with the Right Bauer. The Right Bauer is a German Pilsner. It's brewed right here in Ontario, and in 2022, it was a gold winner for the Ontario Brewing Awards. It is big on flavor, utilizing noble hops like Sapphire and Laurel hops. Sapphire hops is largely grown in the Hallertau region of Germany and is a mild and pleasant. It has spicy notes, melding with tones of sweet fruit-like berry and light tangerine citrus. Soft, but with a distinct hoppy tang taste. Laurel hop has an interesting mix of pleasant floral, herbal, and peppery noble characters, along with notes of lemon, citrus, and dark fruit. So on that, what we're going to ask is everybody is comfortable. Let's turn on our cams. We do need to legally make sure nobody is drinking and driving. So if I at least see your cams on, I can confirm that. And then we could all get to our first beer. Bruno, thank you. Cheers to Bruno, I can see you. Oh, you done. Let me try this one. All right, cheers. Cheers, Ahmed.
Cheers.
Cheers to everybody.
Cheers.
Well, that's pretty good.
It's good.
Could you guys taste the notes? Does anybody online, guys? So we want to keep this interactive. This is one of the times we're going to ask everybody to unmute themselves, jump in, tell us what you think of Right Bauer, the first one that we're trying out.
I would buy this.
Thank you, Bruno. Yeah, it's a good one. I could taste I can taste that tangerine citrus right at the end.
Yeah,
Yes.
I would totally let Bruno buy this for me. It's really quite good.
Bruno, Brandon, I will send you. I'll make sure you guys exchange email at the end of this. Let's see if we can make that happen. Bruno, I'll cover you if I have to.
Thank you.
No problem. Awesome, awesome. So that's the first beer that we're going to be tasting. I'm going to finish it off, and what we're going to do now is we're actually going to jump into some of the live questions that we have. Chris, we're gonna sort of walk you through. The first thing that we want to do is to make sure that everybody here on the call today has a little bit of an understanding about Wealthsimple. So if you could sort of walk us through Wealthsimple, how many employees? What business are you guys in? Tell us about the model, the culture, the vision, et cetera. Like, give us a little bit of a feel. That way we all understand who Wealthsimple is.
Yeah, sounds great. So we're a fintech based out of Canada. Canada is primarily our focus market right now. We used to be a little bit in the States, but we decided to focus on Canada to really give Canadians the best experience they possibly could have. Our company, as I mentioned, has grown a lot. When I joined, we were about 100 some people, and just surpassed about 1,200. So a lot of growth over that 5-year period. Really exciting to see. I think one of the challenges that we really nailed, I'd like to say, is maintaining our culture as we've continued to grow, which is a really big struggle for companies as they start to grow much larger. We've been through a couple office moves, a couple location changes, but no matter what, Wealthsimple is still Wealthsimple, and you still feel that when you go to the office and interact with our staff. So culture is really important to us, and one thing that we really pride ourselves on is something called the Culture Manual, which you can see on our Wealthsimple website. And it really talks a bit about our values, a few of them being like shipping and improving, putting the client first, debating and then committing, and really just pushing forward in the world of technology. In terms of goals right now, I think we've come a long way over the last bit. We really look for what the consumer's looking for and try to target that. In the pandemic, we really put a lot of focus into our stock trading app and supporting things like the GME growth that so many people talked about and experienced. We've really built a solid foundation in terms of the savings platform, and now we're starting to expand into cash. And we just released options trading, which has been a highly requested feature for a really long time. So again, identifying what people are looking for and saying, yes, let's get you that.
That is amazing. I think you hit it spot on with culture. I think today everybody's looking for that company that has that right culture. And as companies grow, you sometimes see that shift. So it's great that you guys have held true and you've been able to witness that culture sort of take you from 100 employees when you first started to over 1,200 today. So that's huge growth in a short period of time, and not losing that culture is, I think, very key for a lot of employees. A little bit more about the company. How has the company evolved, in the last 5 years that you've been there? How have you seen it evolve? Describe to us the evolution of Wealthsimple that you've gone through the past year as it relates to your industry, your growth, your customer base. If you could give us a little bit about that, I'd love to hear a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think there's been a lot of change, especially as a small startup to, I'd like to say we're still a startup, but we're no longer still a startup just based on our size. But we still have that startup mentality, I like to say. As I mentioned, we've gone through a whole bunch of iterations in terms of location, focus, regions. So when I joined us, we were originally focusing on Canada, the US, and the UK. But we've slowly moved out of some of those markets to really focus on Canada and say, instead of trying to give everybody an okay experience, let's focus on one group and say, let's give them an excellent experience. And once we nail that, then let's look at expanding out again. So I think that's been a really big focus of ours, is saying, let's not tackle too much. Let's focus on a vision that we want to achieve. And in that case, it's financial freedom for Canadians.
Yeah.
So that's really what we're focusing on right now. In terms of the company's growth, I think for a lot of companies, COVID changed a lot, to be honest with you. A couple of years ago, I was going to the office every day. I enjoyed that. That was just standard for everybody. But now we are definitely a remote first culture. We have offices in New York and in Toronto still, but they're much more like a WeWork space where if you want to come in, you can book a desk, you can work there for the day, but there's no pressure to do so. We also use that space for things like company takeovers where we bring in everybody from certain teams.
Yeah.
I just had one of those with my team literally yesterday, where we flew in people from BC, Alberta, out east, and there were about on our infrastructure organization, 60 of us together, really celebrating and discussing our objectives and visions and keeping that Wealthsimple ship simple.
Awesome. That's amazing to hear. I think a lot of organizations right now are focusing, do we bring employees back? Do we have a remote first type mentality? I don't know what the right answer is, and so I won't chime into that too much. I'll say on my end, I am always ecstatic when people have the option, number one. Number two, I always do like when there is an opportunity for people like me to come into the office and interact with you and your team. So as we continue to dive deep into this relationship, I enjoy that.
Freedom of choice is also good.
Definitely very important, to have. Moving out of about the company, let's take a look at a little bit of the vision, the role of the technology. So if you can you describe your approach to technology, how it fits and how it changes? Where do you want your team to go and why?
Yeah, technology is something that we're obviously exposed to. I'm an IT manager. It's not something that, is here or there. It's everywhere, always. In terms of our team, I think one of the things that I really learned in my 5 years at Wealthsimple is not to think about solutions for today, but to take those solutions and think about how to solve them a year or 2 years from now. Because what works for 100 people doesn't work for 300 people, and what works for 300 people doesn't work for 1,000 people.
Correct.
So really looking for a solution that is scalable, is automated is a really big thing lately. We're limited in terms of our head count. Most companies are. So really saying, I don't want somebody to be doing that work. I want to find, a solution that does that work for us to some extent. And I really see that, there's been a prevalence of ChatGPT and these other AI systems in the last couple of months. I think that tech has really been looking at that for a couple of years, and there's just been a consumer focus on that for the last short while. But those systems have existed for a while, and really embracing those automations is key for, our company, but any company's success to some extent. And I think that's really the most important thing, is not thinking about today, but thinking about tomorrow.
Correct. I'd like to touch on AI. I think ChatGPT is one of the hottest topics that seems to be trending everywhere. I finally broke down. I swore a word to myself. I would never use it, never logged in. I could do this on my own. And then I logged in 2 weeks ago, and I realized it generates better emails than I do. This is recorded, so I can't say I do not use it. I generate my own email. It is a pretty nifty tool, quick place to get quick answers, and it is showing us a mechanism that, with great tools like AI, that we can start to embrace automation, make some changes. It helps get you answers faster. So it's going to definitely be a game changer in the way we work. I think moving forward.
I think a lot of companies build a lot of workflows to help automate their work, and AI can take away the building of those automations and just say, here, let's identify areas of opportunity that you may not be aware of, and then let's implement a solution or help you build that solution.
Yeah.
So really excited for that area.
Yeah, definitely awesome. That is amazing. Now, we have an option. We could go on with questions, but I'm feeling a little parched. Ahmed and Chris, you feeling a little parched?
Yeah.
I think then we should go into our second taste testing one. This one, the next beer that we have on tap is Snowstorm. Everybody have their Snowstorm beer? I'm gonna finish my first one. I don't want to waste. Snowstorm. It is a hazy IPA. This hazy IPA has undergone fractional freezing. I know what you guys are thinking. What the heck is that? It is fractional freezing, and that is a process that concentrates beer, increasing its strength, intensifying the hop and the flavor. So I'm actually looking forward to this one, because this one has, and I'm going to ruin some of these words, everybody, I apologize, but a Citra, Chinook, and Idaho, 7 come together for a pineapple, stone fruit, and citrus bomb. So it promises to be fruity. It's a strong stout aged in bourbon barrels for 6 months. That is what's next on tap. So I am looking forward to this one. Oh, Chris, I'm supposed to be, the bartender here, but gentleman and a scholar, I appreciate that. I will smell it, but cheers.
Cheers again.
Cheers again to number 2.
Oh.
That smells good.
It does, eh? Oh. Now I need you guys to all unmute this. This one I like. This one I feel like you can taste like the citrus grapefruitness to it.
I really like this one.
Yeah.
It's got a little bit of flavor. I really like the hoppy aftertaste. It reminds me of a beer that I tasted in the UK. I was like right a year or two ago, and this is their kind of thing, and just really hit the spot.
Yeah, I even like the color of it. It feels like the last one was a little bit more clear. This one is, it's got a nice, beautiful tone to it. How about everybody online? Any thoughts on the second one, Snowstorm? How are we ranking this one in comparison to the first one, the Bauer?
I could do one of these. I love IPAs, but I could I like to balance it with the Pilsner. The Pilsner is more of like an everyday drink, and this one's a bit much, you know, to continue to drink after a long night.
Okay, so this is not the go-to, I'm gonna drink 6 of these watching the Leafs tomorrow night, hopefully close out the series. This is more like a one and done, have it, taste it, enjoy it.
100%. Yeah.
Okay.
It is tasty though. It is tasty.
Anybody else? Don't be shy, everybody. There's a prize for the one who answers the most questions. Brandon, you're in the lead. Bruno, you're a strong second right now, you know. But
I have to agree with Brandon. I prefer the Bauer. This is a little bit too much for me. Like you were saying, maybe one and that's it. But I would drink a lot more from the German Pils for sure.
amazing, amazing. Perfect.
Yeah, this is 9%, stuff that'll sneak up on you.
That is the fractional freezing. It got that, you know, like they said, they explained to us that when you do fractional freezing, it concentrates the beer, allowing it to gain its strength. This, in my younger days, might have been the one and done that. You needed 9%. I think it would have been good for me in my youthful days when I drank a little bit more.
Don't sell yourself short. In my youthful days, I would have been drinking 6.
Exactly.
Not anymore.
Yeah. Amazing. Next thing, we're shifting gears. So everybody here on the phone has a little bit of idea of what Wealthsimple does, how they've seen tremendous growth. I always like growth because that to me means you guys are doing the right things. If you're growing your organization, that means, like you said, if you have a customer first mentality, you're driving what the customer needs. They are rewarding you with more business, referrals, people signing on. So that's always an awesome testament. So thank you for giving us a little insight to your organization. The next thing we want to do is now start to pick up the problems you've been trying to solve, you know, when we started to get engaged with you guys. So what was some of the specific points of friction that caused you to look for an identity solution? Where was the challenges that you guys were facing, and what can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so we definitely ran into this solution when we were a much smaller organization. When I joined, I mentioned we were about 100 people. It wasn't a huge deal at that moment in time. It was kind of something like, hey, you should start thinking about this, but it wasn't an immediate concern. I'd say when we started to hit around 150 to 200 people, all of a sudden it was like, oh, we should probably start to think about that scalability and that future state.
Yeah.
We could see that our onboarding was not slowing down. It was in fact increasing, and you know, that rapid growth was definitely going to catch up to us pretty quickly. So we said to ourselves, hey, we need to find a solution and we need to find something fast. So we went on a little bit of a hunt, and we, you know, and solution, we settled on Okta, but we definitely did our due diligence with some other providers as well. And we found limitations when we were looking at some of those other providers that pushed us towards the Okta side of things. But initially, IT and lack of headcount was what made us look for an IDP. There were a ton of processes that me and a couple other of my teammates were doing that were completely manual.
Yeah.
You know, in terms of providing access to applications and just getting users onboarded, we didn't have something to set up zero-touch provisioning or any of those other systems. We were a much smaller company. Yeah. But we needed to say, hey, much to our previous conversation about automation, how can we remove ourselves from this picture and implement some sort of software solution that can really take this off of our plate and then scale?
Yeah.
Must have been taking up a lot of your time throughout the day, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, when I joined, onboarding would be a day-long thing. I'd sit down at the beginning of the day and we'd pump out some accounts, then we'd sit in front of brand new computers and we'd open them up and we'd set them up, and then we'd ship them out. But you know, smaller company, less concerned. That was scalable at that point in time.
Yeah.
But quickly was not.
Yeah.
So that was the reason for us looking for an IDP. We needed to scale and we needed to figure something out that said, how can we quickly grow our business and effectively on the back end?
Yeah.
But on the flip side of that, as we've maintained Okta, I'd say the focus has really changed. It's changed from that automation perspective, because we've really built out a lot of those systems, much more to the security side. You know, there's been so many talks about hacks or compromises, or just integrating different enterprise-grade systems using SSO or different, you know, authentication methods, and centralizing that, keeping everything under that singular login or Okta identity has really allowed us to, you know, keep that company ahead of the curve and ahead of those people who aren't so good in the world.
Amazing. That's amazing to hear. You know, I'll touch on personal experience, you know, and you kind of touch on it with birthright applications, you know, the capabilities to have that now automated with Okta. I've worked for a few different companies, and then I've gone to organizations where I'm like, okay, so what do I need? Where's everything that I need to access? And someone sends you this email that has been collected throughout the generations saying, here's all the links you're ever going to need. It's like, what? What's each one of these links do, et cetera? Versus when I joined Okta, I had this laptop shipped to me. I logged into the Okta, you know, portal, and all of a sudden there are the 100 chiclets that are everything I need to do with an explanation of what it is, one-click single sign-on. So that automation definitely made me feel, I don't know if welcome is the right word, but I was able to integrate into what I needed versus trying to figure out who has the best bookmark history that I could download from their version of Firefox to my version of Firefox.
The only thing we had to do was install it to verify.
Yeah.
And set that up for ourselves. Well, outside of that, everything was given to us.
Yeah, exactly it. So taking on that, taking a second look at it, what were some of the limitations of your existing infrastructure or your identity products to address these challenges?
Yeah, so thinking back a little bit to when that happened, but I think the headcount piece was the biggest thing. So the lack of automation to scale our onboarding was the biggest push to find a provider. Being transparent here, we initially went with a different solution. We didn't pick Okta the first time around. We had a number of partners, and we picked a different one because their solution was one that we already ran in terms of other systems, and it seemed really easy to just say, oh, we'll turn on that feature flag, you know, within your existing system. So we ran that for a little bit of time, but then we found that their product was quite new, and they had a ton of limitations that we weren't quite ready or aware of. And that really, you know, took us back. Again, I like to come back to the thinking of the future perspective. Maybe their product worked for us at that moment, but it wasn't going to scale effectively. And that was our biggest concern. So the one item that really popped to mind for me was a direct integration with our HRIS system. They didn't have that functionality, so they themselves consider their system to be the source of truth. But you know, whether you're using like a Workday or a Bamboo or any of these other systems, that is truly the source of truth you want to pull the data from. So in essence, we were duplicating all that data and actually becoming the source of truth, not HR, which is never how you want you know, systems to flow. If HR is coming to you to be like, who's this contractor? You're like, this isn't a good scenario.
Yes.
So flipping back to say, hey, we need a directly fed HR integrated system. Okta really checked off that you know, tick for us, as well as the fact that you didn't just support SAML integration at the time, but also like OIDC custom applications. The app library was a big push for us as well, just because a lot of these integrations, the instructions were quite set up for us. You know, my team at the time was only 3 people, myself of one of those 3. So going in and integrating, well, now we've got about 200 apps integrated in our Okta instance, but the first few times you do it, you definitely need, you know, a little bit of hand holding, and the instructions really gave that. Like, put this app, custom build your domain, custom build all your information. You guys give screenshots. It was quite a good flow.
Perfect. And thank you. You know, thank you for that. We do love that. And that typically always is something I hear also that resonates with my other customers is the 8,500 plus applications that we have tight integrations with, whether it be, and I expect that in your last question, you talked about how you pivoted more towards now becoming a security conversation with the IAM platform, and looking at some of the security capabilities and stuff like that. They do talk about, hey, Steve, you guys have like over 7,500 applications that you do just there, and then another 1,000 or so that are security integrations with some of the best name brand security tools that are out there that we'll probably touch on later on in this conversation as well. So it is something that does simplify time and stuff like that. So that is a perfect piece. Last one around business and technical challenges. With so many vendors and companies in the market, how do you decide which ones to trust and partner with? What does trust mean to you?
That's a good question. I I think let's start with what trust means to me. And in an enterprise setting for work, trust specifically means to me that I have a good relationship with a vendor, someone we can trust to share our future vision, our goals, and then collaboratively find a solution to those. And I think I've dealt with a lot of vendors in a lot of different industries, and I say this nicely, someone who's willing to tell us that their solution is not the right solution means a lot to me. You know, it's not just like, oh, we can make this work. It's like, hey, we might not be the right person for this, but we, you know, have a great partner in X, Y, or Z, and we'd love to refer you to them. And then once you use them, we can tie our systems together. So collaboration and really that foresight is something that I rely on for a lot of my vendors, and I think is really important because I'm not a genius at everything.
Yeah.
And a lot of the systems that we're implementing, whether it was a few years ago to today, it's our first time implementing one of these systems for, you know, a new business reason or, you know, automation. So pulling those knowledges and saying you might have exposure to 4 different vendors, you know, let me listen to you, Steve, or you, Ahmed, and say, you know, who do you trust and recommend? And then you can help me generate my short list to then do further due diligence with. That's really a good relationship to me.
Awesome.
So I think that's a really good starting point in terms of trust and what's being looked for. In terms of implementing systems, again, a lot changes as your company grows. So when we were a scrappy startup, it was very much a matter of saying, oh, your system did that thing and we need that, let's get you and let's onboard you and let's do that pretty quickly. And things were much faster at that point in time, but you know, sometimes riskier. So as we've grown as a company, we've implemented a lot more processes. We have a dedicated vendor procurement team now who vets and goes through a number of systems. You know, there's lots of legal conversations back and forth with security. It's a much more regimented and rigorous process for a good reason, which I think sometimes can slow things down, but on the flip side, really gives you the due diligence to know, you know, the company you're working with, you know, validates a lot of those trust perspectives that we need to worry about, and then we can just work on that relationship from there.
And also shows how much you guys have grown at the same time.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah. No, that's a great point. You know, and it's always great. I think you're right when you can have a technical trust advisory relationship with your partner that they can come in and be honest, saying, hey, listen, yeah, I can kind of do what you want, but you don't really want us to do that.
Yeah.
You're gonna pull your hair out. And when I'm in that position, I always typically say, hey, I've got 3 kids. I don't need a 4th one yelling type thing. So I'd rather not give you something that ain't right for you, because then you're gonna be my 4th kid yelling at me, and I've already got 3 of those. I don't want any more of that. So it's always good to be able to understand where are your strengths, how that strength can help enable and help organizations, you know, solve some of the problems that they're looking at, but not trying to fit a square peg in a round hole.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the support that we look for in these scenarios is Okta or another company. They're kind of an extension of us to some extent.
Yeah.
Like, we're using your systems, we trust you. I think relationships we have with our CSMs like Ahmed are key because, you know, you're an Okta employee, but he's kind of also a Wealthsimple employee in terms of the fact that he's, you know, advocating for us, looking for us, and trying to find those solutions for us. So instead of us having to dig up an answer, sometimes we can come to you and say, hey, you've dealt with this before. Can you, you know, give us your best practice or your scenario, or connect us with somebody on your team to enable us?
Yeah, and I think you guys have a nice little setup, and for anybody that is an Okta customer or is not an Okta customer, you do have the ability to not only work with your account team, this pre-sales engineers and sales reps like myself, but we do also give you an option to have a customer success manager who's a technical resource that ends up, like you said, wears a Wealthsimple golf shirt or the golf shirt of the company that you work for, and they're an extension of your team that sits there and really tries to understand your environment fully, your business cases, your business practices, your business outcomes, and helps you guys deliver on that. So
Makes it easy for you guys, right? It's all relationship with us. I mean, like, in
100%.
less than a year, I think we're like pretty tight at this point. I trust you guys, and I hope you guys trust us, right? So that's the whole goal. That's what we're trying to do as, you know, as a CSM role for you guys. That's just great.
exactly. Okay, so we talked about some of the business and technical challenges. We're going to move on to some of the security challenges. What were some of the security challenges you faced with identity? What were some of the security gaps you wanted to identify and close out?
Yeah, so I think one of the security challenges we identified, I touched upon a bit briefly, but it was just standardizing with our HR system and finding a source of truth.
Yeah.
I think that was one of the big challenges that we initially had. And that timing coincided right with the migration of our HRIS system as well, which from a back-end perspective threw a bit of an additional complexity into there, because the system we were using, we were also pushing forward to change over at the same period of time. So that was the big thing that we were looking for, was just standardizing and having a source of truth. Okta is that from an identity perspective, and that really helps us. And as well as standardizing login. That was probably the other biggest thing, you know, having employees log into different services with different applications, different MFAs, not having a source of truth again for those was becoming a bit of a concern as we grew, and standardizing that to say, hey, everything is accessed through this Okta portal. Just click on an app in your app view, and it will log you right in, was a big win for us.
Awesome. Amazing. You know what, and I like that. And some of the cool conversations I'm starting to have with customers now, and it'll touch on the next topic that we'll touch on briefly, because we want to make sure that we leave enough time for everybody on the calls to ask you some questions as well at the end. As we start to focus around zero trust, and a lot of organizations are talking about zero trust. I know we had some questions, but what do you tell us about how identity is now fitting into your zero trust strategy? How do you view security today in this perimeter-less type environment? You're a remote first type work organization. How does identity weave into zero trust for you guys?
I think it's the pillar of zero trust, to be honest with you. You know, for you to standardize zero trust, you need to have a platform that you interact with and you trust the information coming from. And that in our case is Okta, meaning, you know, we trust the Okta logs of who's logging in, who's accessing what. If people are having issues and need resets, we're trusting the information we're gathering from these platforms to be able to securely help them and solve their problems. I think that's sort of a cornerstone there. And secondly, as we've grown as an organization, there's been a number of integrations that we've started to, you know, utilize that we haven't previously. A big one that I can think of is just device trust, to be honest with you. That took quite a while to get us to a point where we could implement, but the fact that we now can say you cannot log into your non-work applications on a non-work device is a huge piece, and we could not do that without our integration with Okta and your integration with our MDM providers.
Yeah. Chris, your music to my ears. You know, like I said in my intro, I've been in cybersecurity for the majority of my career. I was a systems engineer for longer than I've been on this business side. I think it's called the business side because I feel bad saying sales guy, but an important part to me is what you said. Identity is the foundation of zero trust. I worked at a previous company that did a lot of traditional network type security and cloud-based security, and I would go in and I talk about SASE and scrutinizing of traffic and remote worker and, you know, COVID helped expedite that. I'm like, you need to, you know, mount backhaul traffic. You need to send it to my SASE cloud, do this, do that. And I joined Okta, and within the first month, I had to send out apology emails to all my large customers saying, hey, you know how I told you if this solves zero trust, there's that? And I was like, you got to get your identity nailed down first. Once you understand who the user is, trust the device, and understand what access should they have, then you can go and scrutinize the traffic, do advanced malware, do SASE in the cloud, do proxy in the cloud, firewall in the cloud. But you need to establish that baseline first. So I love you for saying that. And because I love you for saying that, and I know you've been talking a lot and your throat must be dry, I think we should move on to our third and final taste test of the day. This one is Gravitational Lens. It is a bourbon barrel imperial stout. Gravitational Lens is Quality's first foray into barrel aging their beers. This imperial stout is strong, flavorful, aged in bourbon barrels for a total of 6 months before it's packaged. It is filled with chocolate and coffee flavored notes. Oh, I'm already liking this. Look how dark this is when you pour it. Chocolate coffee flavored notes. This does not give us the excuse to drink it in the morning, everybody. I know that's what you're thinking. The bourbon aroma is easy to detect, so I will ask as you pour it, take a smell of it, see if you can smell that bourbon in it. The barrel aging brings out the flavor of oak and vanilla, two of my favorite things. I eat vanilla oatmeal almost every morning. Now you guys know what I like to eat for breakfast. This complex combination of flavors and aromas all come together for a decadent treat to be sipped and savored. So going back to Brandon, this might not be the ones that we're pounding tomorrow while we watch the Leafs win or Winnipeg close the gap, and hopefully in tonight's game, but it's one of those ones that it sounds like it's going to be a dessert beer that I'm going to enjoy. So on that, let me say cheers to my peers, and I'm going to take a sip.
Cheers.
Cheers. Oh, that's pretty good. I can already hear Brad. Brad, I know you're saying this is not a chugger. This is not one that we're going to drink hard, but not bad, right?
I mean, it's not bad. I'm just wondering, like, what are you doing? You guys are like 9.5, 9%. Like, these are pretty intense. This one's really good. This is a nice kind of end of the night bonfire. It's bonfire season now. This is one I would definitely drink by the fire after the Leafs parade in June. We get the fire going. This is the stout that I'm gonna have.
Anybody else want to chime in? Tell us what they like about this one. I didn't mention that there's a free ticket to. I can't say actually until the end there. But if anybody else wants to chime in, because Brandon is cleaning house right now.
I agree. I really enjoy the bourbon taste, and you can taste it. It's really, really nice. I don't know if I like the chocolate taste, but it's okay. It doesn't bother me.
I find right at the end I can taste the coffee. Like I can.
A little bit.
At the end for me, like that the coffee is popping a little bit at the end. I am a coffee drinker, so I'm going to try this. Don't tell anybody at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. So whoever is my 8:30 a.m. meeting, it should be interesting for you. Perfect. Let's jump back into it. I want to keep a track on time. It is 4:42. We got approximately 8 minutes left of questions that we want to ask everybody out there across Canada. Please submit your questions online. We will also ask you to unmute your mics at the end if you have some questions. But if you want, please enter your questions right now into the question rooms as we're talking, and we will start to get to some of those customer questions right at the end. I've been talking a lot. I want to enjoy my coffee beer. Kyle, would you like to take over and ask Chris some of these questions?
For sure. Thank you. Okay, so before we get to your Q&A, I wanted to talk to Chris about his Okta journey. So what could you tell us has been your experience with Okta? And I know you've used it for a couple of years now, but could you just elaborate more on your journey with us?
Yeah, I think our journey with you has grown a lot, to be honest with you. As I mentioned, we implemented it originally for just scaling and headcount and growth. But this is now our 4th year, and 4 years later, we've automated a lot of those problems in years 1 and 2. So we've had other problems to solve, to be candid with you. So limited headcount continues to be a thing that we're, and many businesses struggle with. We're a small team, lean and mean, like I like to say. But in terms of that scalability, there's been a number of additions that we've rolled out to our Okta platform to help us effectively scale or replace other systems that we just said, hey, why are we integrating Okta in this other system when Okta effectively does this itself? So a couple good examples here. When we signed up for like the main Okta platform with provisioning and integration and identity, which is like our core tenant. But we added on about a year or two later Okta workflows, which has been like a big thing for us, especially from like a deprovisioning or provisioning perspective. The ability to say, based on your role, your team, your start date, let's get you these services, or heaven forbid you leave, let's deactivate you automatically from these 26 applications. That's been a really cool addition for us in the last little while, and it also allowed us to differentiate a different workflows platform, which was really nice to see. So a bit of cost savings as well, even though we added some features to Okta. And then recently we implemented another feature, which was called identity governance. And that's really helped us. We just achieved some SOC certifications for our company, which has been really exciting and a lot of work on the back end. But that tool and that addition was really help us, run attestations and say, these users need access to these specific apps, and these are the roles or permissions that they have. And not only allow us to do that once, but run that on a weekly, quarterly, monthly, annually basis, however we deem fit. So that's been a really big takeaway for us.
That's great. That's great. And talking more on the Okta product itself. So what other products are you using within the Okta? You're using workflows, you're using IGA, provisioning, deprovisioning. How does this fit within the whole Wealthsimple IT environment?
Yeah, so Okta is often our core platform for a lot of those different integrations. And when we look for a system, we're saying, hey, key item for us is, does it support provisioning? Does it support, the security features? Does it support the tools that we're looking for? So a few things that pop to mind, obviously HRIS integration is key. Provisioning is really key for us as well. Device trust was a recent thing that we implemented in terms of our journey and has been a really, big takeaway. We've also gone through a couple different iterations of MFA and security. So, we standardized on Okta Verify, which was really exciting, and we've been running that for a couple of years. Okta just had their, upgrade to sort of their own identity management platform. So we started running FastPass, which was like a new integration, and that really, allowed us to better integrate with Touch ID and a couple other, Mac-based tools and take our user experience to the next level. And in the last little bit, we've really taken security as a forefront, and we're in the process of rolling out like FIDO YubiKeys to all employees, which has been a big push for us as well to, separate the devices and really say, hey, WebAuthn is currently the most secure standard. We're going to really push forward with that at this point.
I mean, that's great. That's great to hear, especially within your zero trust journey that you guys are doing. And, I'm happy to see that Okta is really helping you through that. How about on the remote work, and how has Okta helped you transition straight to remote work? I know we already touched on that before. How has it really advanced it?
I'll say that when COVID happened, I was really glad that we had an identity management platform in place. If we didn't have Okta or an IDP in place at that time, I think the seamlessness of the transition from in person to remote first would have been a much harder transition to accomplish. So for me, that's been a fundamental thing. I think we would have been running around with our heads cut off and screaming and wishing our lives were over to some extent if we didn't have something like that in place.
How did it impact your employees, the overall workforce?
They didn't feel that much of an impact. And I think one of the big takeaways is that our offices, we're not on-premise. We're a cloud-first company. We've always been a cloud-first company. And from a security or login perspective, our offices are just like a coffee shop, as I mentioned, like a WeWork space. So you could always have done your work from anywhere. But that is specifically tied to the fact that we had a solid identity management and security platform in place. Without Okta, we wouldn't have been able to do that.
And that's great. Now, I'm very happy to hear that. Where are you guys going now? What does the future look like for Wealthsimple with the technology you guys currently have? And how does Okta play a role with that?
Yeah, so I think we chatted a bit about it, but like ChatGPT and automation right now is really what we're focusing on. With identity governance, which was a recent feature we picked up, not only does it solve the fact that we need to do attestation of applications, but it also allows us to provision users to applications. And that's been a big focus of ours from the Okta perspective that we're starting to tackle, to say, hey, instead of cutting a ticket for this, let's see if we can implement a Okta workflow through our Slack, where somebody just says, hey, I need access to this, and then Okta says, sure, you need access to that, and we're going to give it to you. And eliminate the ticket flow while still tracking that information in a ticket, but alleviate the workflow.
Yeah, definitely. You touched on so many great things, Chris, that I want to thank you for, again, taking the time to try 3 beers with me and peers across Canada. To all of our audience members out there, we're about to open up the Q&A section to everybody here. You're more than welcome. If you're too shy to go off of mute and turn on your cam, you're more than welcome to submit the question to the QA. If you are 3 beers into it times 9%, that's 27% so far. And I don't know if you drink the whole can or not, then you're more than welcome to turn on your mic. Like Brandon, I know you're gonna ask me a good question, but with that, before we jump into the Q&A, like you hit on so many great things. Like I love the fact that you talked about the integration, the automation, the integration into your current security stack, the integration into your current tools. That was something that took me as a new employee and a new hire a while to get used to. I came from, Cisco systems where we were, I don't like to say close platform, but I had my tool sets. And so when I came here, I was like, and someone would be like, oh, CrowdStrike, and Cisco had endpoint, or Microsoft endpoint, or this endpoint, or that endpoint, or, Proofpoint, or endpoint. I'd be so defensive, and I was like, wait a minute, I'm Okta. I work with everybody, and it feels kind of nice. to have friends and not frenemies, like I did in my past life where I had to try to compete for everything. So I'm glad that our platform has given you that ability to automate and everything like that. Everybody on the phone, this conversation is more for your benefit. I got what I needed. I got to hang out with my buddy Chris here, and I got to try 3 really cool beers. But what we want to do now is open the floor, like I mentioned, to questions for Chris at Wealthsimple. Again, you could ask that through the Q&A. Maybe we'll take a couple of
Yes.
online questions that we got first.
We have a question for Chris. How did you folks handle vulnerabilities during the transition from on-prem to cloud?
Great question. So I think the first thing to call out is that we never really had on-prem systems. So we had a big advantage there in terms of the fact that we were born cloud first, and we made a big focus to always stay cloud first. I think that's a big advantage of ours to many other banks. Beyond that, from a vulnerability perspective, we both utilize patch management and vulnerability scanning as 2 things that we do to constantly stay on top of you and ongoing.
Great, great. We have another question from the crowd. This is actually for Okta. Now, does Okta integrate with your KYC, know your customer process?
So from an internal identity management perspective, Okta is our source of truth, but from an external customer perspective, no, we run our systems in-house at this point in time.
Right. I'm going to pull a few here. Let me see. So another question for Chris. For an organization like ours, which does not have any specific compliance requirements, a technology leader, I've considered picking up a security framework and start working towards voluntary compliance in an effort to strengthen our overall security posture. As you are aware, there are several security frameworks like ISO series, NIST, syscontrols, COVID. Do you have any insight on how to pick a framework to adopt?
I think the choice of which framework you want to adopt is a decision that you and your own company sort of need to centralize upon. Speaking candidly, NIST and CIS benchmarks are 2 that I've looked very closely at and that we've chosen to adopt, but the decision of your company is always on you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I could echo that, looking across my customer base, a lot of them have standardized and looked at NIST as one of the primary ones as well. So there's a lot of organizations that look to that from a standardization perspective. And just to add comments on the last one, I know we are focusing on workforce protection. Chris has walked us through that, but that last question, I think, talked about customer identity. We do have a 2-product suite. One is the workforce, which we're talking to Chris about today, and we do have a customer identity platform that gives you frictionless based access from a consumer perspective, that login experience that we try to simplify and stuff like that. Yeah, so anybody who's interested in that, reach out to your Okta rep, and if you don't know who your Okta rep is, you have 6 beers at home. So invite me over for a beer and I'll find you the right person that you need to do. Next question.
We have one other great question actually for Wealthsimple. Someone says that they love your product, it's easy to use. Now, what does the company plan to engage smaller companies buy-in to invest with them via payroll, into RSPs, RESPs, etc.?
So we actually have a business side of our company where if you're interested in reaching out to set up some of those things, we could definitely connect with you. If you want to potentially throw your info to Marjorie in DM or reach out to her, she can connect with me, and then I'm happy to connect you with them in the long term.
Great. With the Okta Zero Trust, how can we make sure our user profiles are consolidated in a single universal directory so we have a centralized view of everyone?
Yeah, so universal directory is a pretty key feature of identity, to be candid with you. And Okta is our universal directory. It's a matter of gathering your HRIS system or where you're containing your customer or employee information and then setting up that integration. And then you can pull in information from that and layer other systems on top of it to set Okta up as your universal directory. So you have the employee information that you need, potentially paired with other device or security information on a single pane of glass.
One thing I always hear from customers, and maybe comment on that, to this point, is they always are amazed by our ability not only to take multiple sources of truth, amalgamate them together, but the flexibility around how we allow you to import that data set. I want to take first initial, last name of that, And we've got a lot of key filtering capabilities where you can pick and choose the attributes to create that global UID, view of that user. Has that been helpful for you guys?
Absolutely. And we've gotten quite, unique with it. As I said, you can set up very basic attributes,
Yeah.
but then you can also create, scripts or some natural language formats to pull in very unique pieces of information. And I'd say that feature has been very key to us because you need to customize specific fields in specific ways to integrate into various systems.
Awesome.
There is one more question on the board as well. Let's squeeze this one in. How can identity lay the foundation for any zero trust security initiative and fits into a larger ecosystem and supports a more robust security posture?
Well, I think coming back to the original call out, identity is the foundation of trust. So having a platform, Okta or other, which you can trust and you can integrate this information in, really sets you up for success in that regard. And Okta, well, the source of truth in terms of identity is not the source of truth. I think that's important to remember. It's just pulling information from other systems. So you need to trust the data from your HR or your other providers. That's what's really setting you up for a successful foundation. If you can't trust that data, that's the data that you're importing. So that's where you should start looking.
Yeah. And for me, what I love about Okta, and if I take my whole 20 years of doing a whole mishmash of different things in security, to what you described, you've got that foundation. When you take a zero trust and you say, what does that really boil down to? They simplify to least privilege access, privilege and access being an identity type conversation. But what I love, again, because I'm a security nerd at heart, is the integrations that we have with so many different security vendors. I don't want to give free plugs because I didn't pay for these beers, but imagine you have an endpoint technology that sees suspicious behavior on a device, and all of a sudden it can, in real time, send a signal to Okta. And Okta could be like, that's interesting. What would you like to do, Mr. Administrator? And you could say, I'd like to step up authentication. I'd like to put another factor from an MFA perspective. I'd like to use biometrics. I would like to lock them out from these key applications. I would like to, and you can keep on going with that. So going back to that question from a zero trust perspective, that automation, I like to describe it as risk-based access and control. And that risk base is being determined in real time by the hundreds of thousands, depending on how big or small you are, or up to millions of dollars that you spend on that security posture. You can take all of that well-spent money designing that posture and have it automate and send signals to Okta and have Okta react in real time. To me, I'm going to say my first swear word, but that's badass. I apologize for swearing, but I think that's pretty damn cool. Being able to do that in real time, simplify and have that all automated, I think really takes time to detect, time to respond, and really helps shrink it.
Great.
So that's just my thoughts on that.
Well, do we have time for one more question? I think it's a great way to close this off because, Chris, you talked about trust, right? And trust is about transparency, about being frank about what works, what doesn't work, and how we can help you. Now, Brandon has a question. Chris, as great as Okta is, what features do you think that we can work on to have a great partnership and roadmap with you?
Oh, that's a great question. I think thinking about the platforms and the answers that I've given today, I would love to see a couple more automations within the Okta platform. I think from a workflows perspective, you guys have started to dabble into suggested workflows, but there's a huge opportunity there where there's a lot of complex workflows that we'd love to better utilize, but don't have the time to implement ourselves. And I think that would be a really good takeaway. And as well from the IGA perspective, which is something we're implementing right now, I think it's a really cool feature and tool because it's automating away a lot of our tickets. But the setting up of that tool is fully manual. And I would love to see some automations to say, hey, let's allow a couple button clicks where we can create these groups and these links for you, because the end result is pretty perfect, but to get there is requiring a bit more work than we expect.
So simplify the heavy lift to get to the end success. I will definitely take that up. On that note, everybody across Canada, I want to say thank you so much for giving us time. Chris, thank you. Thank you for coming out and spending and sharing your experience with Okta. For everybody out there that has more questions, reach out to your Okta rep. And like I mentioned, if you don't know who your Okta rep is, reach out to any one of us and we'd be more than happy. You could hit us on LinkedIn, Twitter, email, any social form that you find us on. We'd be more than happy to get you to your correct rep. And on that note, we will have a great, safe evening. And for everybody who's got 3 half-can beers left over, make sure you drink them maybe after dinner. and enjoy the rest of your evenings or afternoons, depending on where you are.
Thank you again.
Brendan, Bruno, you guys, your prize is a romantic dinner with me. I will send you location and time shortly after this.
Thank you
Love
so much. Thank you.
Thank
Love it,
you.
love it.
Go Leafs.
Yes, go Leafs.
What a game.
Cheers. Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.